guys, welcome back to the Friday Q&A. This week I'm going to talk all about the safety of hydroquinone in your over-the-counter and prescription bleaching creams like Am Acad cream, Triluma. This week I reviewed for you all the MD Complete Dark Spot Corrector, which also has hydroquinone. And I plan to share some skincare routines for fading dark spots, sunspots on the back of the hand using this product. So I anticipate getting many questions on the safety of hydroquinone. I have always gotten a lot of questions about that in my other dark spots videos, how to fade dark spots. My Q&A on melasma generated many questions about the safety of hydroquinone. So I thought I would do a Q&A today discussing all of those concerns. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Andrea. I am a dermatologist. My YouTube channel is a lot of fun vlogs of my life, as well as skincare product reviews and skincare Q&As and skincare routines and some plant-based recipes. So if this type of thing is of interest to you, then stick around and subscribe for more. So hydroquinone was first noted to be a skin bleaching agent sometime around 1936, okay? It first began being used commonly, both prescription and in cream form, sold over the counter in the 50s. So it has been around for a long time, and it was first studied in 1961 in a randomized controlled trial and shown to be effective as a topical quote bleaching cream for hyperpigmentation concerns, things like melasma and post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. And because it's been around that long, we have pretty decent safety records of hydroquinone use in the United States. And personally, I feel very comfortable with it. However, there is a lot of concern surrounding this ingredient. It is banned over the counter in other countries. And so, for starters, one question that I get a lot is, well, isn't hydroquinone absorbed to very high levels in the body when you apply it on the skin, and isn't that dangerous? I've heard some studies from the FDA that the dermal absorption of hydroquinone is somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 11%. Is that correct, and how can you feel comfortable with this? Well, what you should know about those studies and about that citation and about the absorption of hydroquinone from putting it in a cream form onto your skin is that hydroquinone in cream form is very dependent on the vehicle that it is in as far as how it is absorbed, okay? So in those studies that are mentioned, and thrown around where the levels of absorption are so high, those were with creams in which the vehicle was ethanol, okay? Hydroquinone in an ethanol vehicle has much higher systemic absorption than hydroquinone in a non-ethanol vehicle. In the United States, as a result of that, ethanol vehicles for hydroquinone cream are prohibited, okay? You will not find an over-the-counter hydroquinone cream in the United States that contains ethanol because the absorption of hydroquinone from that vehicle is much higher. When you take into consideration how hydroquinone is absorbed from the skin and how it is processed by the body, peak plasma concentrations are actually quite low. Our body has a pretty keen ability to handle hydroquinone. It's present in many of the foods that we eat naturally. And so, for example, a 2% hydroquinone cream, like what would be an Am Acad cream, reaches a peak plasma concentration of 0.04 microgram equivalents per liter. Okay, so it's quite low, all right? Prescription hydroquinone is a little bit higher than that, but both are very negligible. And as I said, hydroquinone is present already in many of the foods that we eat, okay? A half cup of tea has about 14 micrograms of hydroquinone. A cup of coffee has approximately 31 micrograms of hydroquinone. Wheat bread has hydroquinone in it. Pears have quite a bit of hydroquinone. A pear can have upwards of 637 micrograms of hydroquinone in a pear, all right? You all have seen my grocery hauls and you know how much coffee I drink, okay? If hydroquinone were that deadly, then it's any wonder I'm still alive. I've been drinking more than half a cup of coffee for many years, 99% of my life. And pears were the first food that I was given transitioned to, so I've been eating pears and drinking coffee the majority of my life, and many people out there consume these foods as well. So our body is well equipped to handle hydroquinone, believe it or not. Furthermore, a lot of the foods that we eat not only have a high level of hydroquinone, but they also have a high level of alpha-arbutin, which is also present in the MD Complete Dark Spot Corrector. I mentioned this in my review of the product. Alpha-arbutin is almost like a precursor of hydroquinone. It's a type of hydroquinone, plant-derived. And in the acid environment of the stomach, alpha-arbutin is very easily converted to more hydroquinone. So in addition to hydroquinone, many foods have, a pre-hydroquinone. So, just from our diet alone, the hydroquinone we consume, the levels of hydroquinone in the body exceed that of a simple topical application from a 2% hydroquinone cream or a 4% hydroquinone cream. So, our bodies are actually well equipped to handle hydroquinone. We're able to process it and excrete it in our kidneys very quickly. It's cleared from our body in approximately 24 hours. It's undetectable. So it's, our metabolism is such that it's a compound that we're familiar and we're designed to handle quite well. Modern bioassays for reproduction, fertility, and teratogenicity fail to demonstrate really any concerns for hydroquinone as far as impairing fertility and causing any harm. I also get a lot of questions, does hydroquinone cause cancer? I heard that hydroquinone was associated with cancers of the kidneys and cancers of the bone marrow, leukemias. Is that true? Should we be concerned? Specifically, the studies that people refer to are those in which male rats treated with high levels of hydroquinone had increased renal tubular cellular adenomas, which is a type of kidney tumor in a rat. Those rats are a laboratory strain of rats called F344 rats. What you should know about those rats is that regardless of what you do to them, they develop something called chronic progressive nephropathy. It's a problem with their kidneys that they develop regardless of what you do to them. And so they are already predisposed to have more renal cancers by virtue of the fact that they have this disease that they develop regardless of what you do to them. But guess what? There is no such thing as chronic progressive nephropathy in humans. It is specific to these rats, okay? Therefore, the relevance of this model to humans is not exactly there. The second point about the F344 rats, or rats in general, which distinguishes them from us, is that rats don't have a great capacity to metabolize hydroquinone into less toxic intermediaries in comparison to humans, okay? So they simply do not detoxify hydroquinone in the same way that we do, okay? Our biology is different and we're better equipped to handle it. Specifically, rats have a lower capacity to take the hydroquinone through a pathway called glucuronidation, which helps to inactivate the hydroquinone. We're very, very good at that. And unfortunately, because they don't undergo the glucuronidation pathway as readily, they form more toxic mercapturic intermediates that can probably be damaging to their kidney. And they already have a disease of the kidneys, so that added insult of that toxic metabolite to their kidney is a more likely explanation for their development of more renal tumors. Hydroquinone has been in use since the 30s, and there have been no reports of renal tumors or kidney cancers from use of topical hydroquinone, okay? Remember, the absorption from topical hydroquinone is very, very low. Remember, the absorption of hydroquinone in our foods is there as well, and our bodies are well equipped to handle it. Then as far as leukemias, concerns about risk for leukemia with using hydroquinone. These concerns stem again from rat studies in which female rats had an increased number of leukemias when exposed to hydroquinone. Is that something that people should worry about? Well, again, you are not a rat, and there are some differences between rats and humans yet again. Rat leukemia, for starters, is different than human leukemia. rats, rat leukemia starts in the rat spleen, whereas leukemia in humans is a disease of the bone marrow, okay? So they are cancers that arise in essentially different organs. So comparing the two has many limitations. And the next point about the leukemia data is that it doesn't appear that the rat data is reproducible, okay? So there have since been two larger studies in rats exposed to high doses of hydroquinone, and the leukemia data in the rats does not seem to be reproducible, as there have been no increased numbers of leukemias in those rats. Furthermore, what seems to also be occurring is that in the control groups of those rats, so the rats that aren't exposed to the hydroquinone, they too seem to be getting leukemia. So it's a rat strain that, A, gets a cancer that starts in an organ that is very different from humans, and B, probably going to get leukemia by virtue of the fact that it has some underlying susceptibility to leukemias. And lastly, the doses that they're giving these rats are so high in comparison to what you would ever get from a topical application of a hydroquinone containing cream. Then the other question that I get is hydroquinone damaging to the liver? Is it hepatotoxic? Early studies in rats done by the National Toxicologic Program showed an increased number of hepatocellular adenomas, which are a type of liver pre-tumor, in rats. But oddly enough, what they showed is that while they had an increased number of these little small benign tumors, they had fewer overall liver cancers, believe it or not. And subsequent animal studies also seem to demonstrate that actually in the hydroquinone groups, there was less liver toxicity and less liver cancer. So hydroquinone appears to be not damaging to the liver whatsoever, and if anything, potentially could be hepatoprotective. At least that's what some of the literature might suggest. So I've told you about the animal studies, how we're very different from rats, and hopefully that helped to clarify some of what could be conflicting and misleading information from those older laboratory studies. What about human exposures? So there have been a few studies of humans consuming very, very high levels of hydroquinone orally on a daily basis, one in which they consumed 500 milligrams daily, another in which they consumed 300 milligrams daily, and there were no reported increased incidences of any types of cancer, no leukemia, no hepatotoxicity, none of that in people consuming very high levels of hydroquinone. There's also another study in which 9,000 workers from hydroquinone factories were followed. Obviously, with occupations with high levels of hydroquinone exposure. Believe it or not, those individuals had a lower overall incidence of all types of cancers in comparison to control groups. There's one study in which the workers were exposed to aerosolized hydroquinone at a concentration of 30 milligrams of hydroquinone per meter cubed of body surface area, again, with no adverse systemic effects reported at all. So one really cannot conclude that hydroquinone is a carcinogen whatsoever. And on the flip side of that argument, we have over 50 years of safety data with hydroquinone in which there have been no adverse effects to cause us concern for any sort of systemic disease or cancer or aging of the skin, anything like that. The last point that I will touch on and is relevant to hydroquinone is a question that I get about pseudo-ochronosis. I mentioned that in my melasma video, my dark spots video, that one potential risk of using topical hydroquinone long-term is the development of a disfiguring skin condition called pseudo-ochronosis. What is that, and is it dangerous, and should we not use hydroquinone because of that? So Ochronosis, all right, just taking a step back, ochronosis refers to deposits of something called homogentisic acid in the deeper layers of the skin, and it occurs actually in a genetic disease called alkaptonuria, okay? So ochronosis is just that, all right? So while ochronosis is related to a genetic disease called alkaptonuria, there is something subtly different called exogenous ochronosis or pseudo-ochronosis, in which things either applied to the skin or compounds that are ingested can result in deposition of this homogentisic acid into the deeper layers of our skin and create this disfiguring rash called now pseudo-ochronosis or exogenous ochronosis. So there are a number of chemicals that have been implicated in causing exogenous or pseudo-ochronosis. Hydroquinone for one, as well as phenols and phenolic compounds. Additionally, medications like L-Dopa have been shown to be associated with this. L-Dopa is used in Parkinson's disease. And many anti-malarial drugs have also been implicated in causing pseudo-ochronosis or exogenous ochronosis. So it's not something specific to hydroquinone whatsoever. Believe it or not, cases of true pseudo-ochronosis from topical hydroquinone, 2% containing or prescription 4% containing creams here in the United States actually are pretty nil, okay? So the cases that we have of documented pseudo-ochronosis from using bleaching creams come from largely studies in which individuals were obtaining their hydroquinone from bleaching creams that were not necessarily purchased in the United States and may have had many adulterated compounds in them. One alarming trend that has occurred is that in other parts of the world where over-the-counter hydroquinone is banned, people seeking hydroquinone obtain bleaching creams from online pharmacies, and so they get hydroquinone, quote, hydroquinone bleaching creams without a prescription from unregulated sources. And when we go back and look at those creams that these people are obtaining, it's actually quite disturbing. When you analyze what is actually in those creams, not only are there very, very high levels of hydroquinone, but also there are often very, very high levels of other compounds which have been associated with pseudo-ochronosis, namely mercury, okay? Very high levels of mercury, which is dangerous, okay? So that's really when a lot of the cases of ochronosis and pseudo-ochronosis started coming to be reported, okay? And in addition to this issue of a lot of those cases coming from creams that contain things other than hydroquinone, most likely, so there was no actual proof that hydroquinone caused the skin problem in those reports. Another thing is that of the 789 case reports that I'm referring to, 756 of those arose from Africa, okay? So another potential confounder there is that countries in Africa has a much higher problem with malaria than in other parts of the world, and a lot more people are taking anti-malarials there. Anti-malarials are associated with the development of exogenous ochronosis. So here you have a group that may be obtaining bleaching creams from sources in which there are other ingredients in the creams besides hydroquinone that are known to cause this disfiguring skin rash, but also may likewise be taking anti-malarials because they live in an area of the world with more malaria. A motivating factor for me in making this video is that hydroquinone has an excellent track record and a lot of data for being the most robust topical ingredient for skin lightening in disfiguring skin conditions in which there is hyperpigmentation present, like melasma. And that should never be underplayed. The fact that these skin conditions, they're not merely cosmetic, they have a tremendous impact on the individual's self-esteem and overall well-being, okay? So that should never be downplayed. And hydroquinone has the most track record for offering some help for these conditions, okay? So it is not something in my mind to demonize or to fear or to have a phobia about. It's not a perfect solution, however. As I have mentioned in my other videos, there are a number of other compounds, natural ingredients that have decent growing evidence can help. Not as robustly as hydroquinone, but can also help. Things like soy, things like mulberry extract, things like licorice root extract, okay? And these compounds are in a lot of creams that you can buy online, over the counter, bleaching creams, fade creams, brightening creams. You know, here in the US, we're still oftentimes wed to this idea of a tan and seeking a tan and, oh, you're so pasty. But in other parts of the world, it's the opposite motivation, and people will bend over backwards to lighten, whiten, brighten their skin and go to great lengths to do so, okay? So globally, it is a huge cosmetic motivation for Marines. For you as a consumer, what I think is important to understand, okay, is that hydroquinone, A, has the most evidence for helping, okay? It is the one that is frequently feared, okay? And the reason I think that it is most frequently feared is that because it has been in existence and controlled and regulated for over 50 years, we actually have data on it, okay? We have data to say that it works, and we have data looking at what the potential risks are, okay? We have that information. But for these other compounds, we don't have that. We don't have that data, okay? They're not under the same scrutiny. I want you to understand that because something is being sold to you as hydroquinone free and all natural, it does not necessarily mean that it's safer. Everything has a potential to be risky. Do I believe these other natural compounds are safe? Yes, of course. But don't be misled into thinking that a hydroquinone-free cream is somehow safer, okay? You know, really what you should understand is that the ingredients in a hydroquinone-free cream are less well studied, okay? So think of it that way to get around the selling point on the label. The last thing that I want is for any of you out there suffering with melasma or hyperpigmentation, any of these pigmentary problems who have been advised to use hydroquinone, I don't want you to feel as though, you know, you have to lay awake at night fearful of hepatotoxicity, leukemia, kidney cancer. So my hope is that this video was helpful in allaying some of those potential fears so that you can feel a little bit more confident about using hydroquinone. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.